Today's episode of the Goldcast is sponsored by Preseason, baby. It is here. We are so pumped. I need to apologize first to all of Goldcast Nation. We have been gone for 12 days. This is not by choice. Unfortunately, your humble host, Rudy Solis III, has a new job and an impending commercial coming up. And so my schedule has been pretty crazy, but it will be calming down very soon here. A couple more weeks of it kind of being in and out, and then we are full on. Trust me, once we get towards the end of August and into September, we will be back on our regularly scheduled program. Now, Raymond, before we get started, why don't you let them know where can they find us?
You can like us at facebook.com/thegoldcast, and you can also follow us on Twitter at @the_goldcast. And you can also subscribe to us via iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same moniker of the Goldcast.
The Goldcast. Hell yeah. All right, so here we go. We are going to get into game one of preseason. So pumped. It was so exciting to see the team back. Lots to get into. We're going to talk about it after the intro. But of course, guess what, people? Your professor of fanalism has arrived. The greatest fanalist in the game is here. Class is in session. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready? This is the Goldcast.
Boom. Welcome to another edition of the Goldcast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
Boom. Okay, Raymond, here we go. Preseason game one.
In the books.
In the books, baby. Oh, here we go. Oh, God, this is my favorite time of the year. This is the best time for the Goldcast. This is when our fans are the most engaged, is during the NFL season. As some of you may remember, because there are some people that have been here since day one, many moons ago, this was called the 49ers Goldcast. And then we expanded to include all the teams, and we decided that calling it the 49ers Goldcast didn't really embody the entire city. So now we're just the Goldcast. So, Raymond, we have 4 takeaways from preseason game one. We have 2 positive, and we have 2 negative. So we're going to start with the first positive takeaway that we got, and it's going to be the defensive line. So why don't you, greatest fanalist in the game, break down for the people, for you, Goldcast Nation. We're going to break down for you what we saw. Raymond, tell them, what did you see at defensive line, and why is this a positive for the Goldcast?
Well, for one, Kyle Shanahan pretty much sat almost the entire starting roster, with the exception of our rookie wide receivers, and that's about it as far as I can recall. but the defense that included most of the defense, with the exception of, I think, Akella Witherspoon was out there, and I think he and Marcel Harris are going to kind of trade places with be kind of rotating in and out with Jason Verrett. Unless Jason Verrett is able to recover, although it looks like his body's having a little bit of bumps getting fully healed, and that's natural because the nature of his injury is very difficult to come back to. Jerick McKinnon is seeing a little some of that bump too, and I know that Richard Sherman's on a different level psychologically, so he's one of those exceptions. Adrian Peterson's another one of those exceptions, but nonetheless, rant aside, we mostly saw backups and the depth. But the reason why it stood out to me as a positive was because in the first series, we were up against Dallas's first-string starters, with the exception of Ezekiel Elliott, who's holding out for more money. Good luck with that. And there was a lot. This is, again, I know it's preseason, so you do have to take it with a grain of salt, but the fact that if you do well in the preseason, it is a good thing. If you do shitty in the preseason, it's really, really bad. Because in the preseason, you're playing against backups, second string and third string. Third string and fourth string. And then guys trying to make the roster from the 90-man squad. So there's a lot. So if you do bad in the preseason, like it really doesn't reflect well on, your development as a player, especially if you're a high pick and you're struggling against backup third and fourth stringers. So, but in this case, we're going up against what is arguably one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL, and we held them. They didn't score a touchdown all day, but they didn't score a touchdown in the opening drive. They got a field goal, but we held them to that field goal. And so there was good pressure. There was some TFLs. I know our rookie Keandre Greenlaw. He led the team. He tied for most tackles on the day with Marcel Harris. He also had a TFL. I thought that was great. Contavious Street had a couple of TFLs. That was great. So Leroy Reynolds had a sack. Jeremiah Volaga had 2 sacks. These were later in the game, but the fact is it was productive. There was also a fumble in this game. There was 6 passes deflected, so the defensive backs played well. If you're getting good pressure, that takes a lot of, obviously, for those of you that study the game, that obviously takes a lot of pressure off of your secondary. So the fact that they were getting consistent pressure, and which also led to some sacks and also some TFLs to slow down the running game and really make them one-dimensional, force them into throwing positions when they're not really trying to do that. It really kind of led to a really balanced defensive attack, and that was great because our defensive line, we know what our starters are capable of. We know what the potential is for some of those players, and we know what we're getting out of some of those players in, i.e. DeForest Buckner. So, to see the second group come in and do as well as they did, albeit preseason, was a positive takeaway. I don't know if you saw the same thing.
So I agree. Why is this important? Well, the reason this is important and why we take this away as a positive is because, as we know, injuries loom. They loom, and actually we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this episode about a negative and the lack of depth. And what this shows to me is that there truly is depth, and John Lynch has done his job. We're going to need players to be able to come in, fill in for subs, put in quality downs here and there. And the fact that this unit played as well as they did also gets me really excited for when we see the starting unit. Because if this is what the backups are doing, again, albeit preseason, the fact that they could hold their own, as you said, against one of the best offensive lines in the league shows that we are finally building some depth at a position that has been greatly lacking in the last several years. I think John Lynch, it was clear that he made it his mission that he was going to address this, and I think they've done a great job, and I think this showing of the backups is the start of that. So we are in agreement there, Raymond, and 100%. So let's talk about our first negative. Our first negative. And that would be O-line concerns. So now we were just talking about depth at the defensive line. The offensive line seems to be a little thin. So let's talk about that. Why is this a negative for the Goldcast?
So the first thing I want to point out is that our tackle position is solid. Even though Joe Staley is in the twilight of his career, he's still an extremely good player. He's not a 6-time Pro Bowler for nothing. He's still got great experience. And we also have Mike McGlinchey, who's doing great. And he's really coming along. He's giving credibility to John Lynch's ability to seek out talent. So that's good that that's working out. Offensively, John Lynch has done very well between George Kittle and Mike McGlinchey. Trent Taylor has potential, but we'll mention that a little bit later. But we lost Sean Coleman for the year, who was a backup swing tackle. He fractured his fibula and dislocated his ankle. If you actually saw that play, it was actually kind of nasty. If you look closely at his leg, it looks like his ankle does pop out. And
it was bad.
It was pretty bad. So again, this is what happens when you're in a play, and unbeknownst to you, you're trying to block, or if you're on defense, you're trying to shed a block to get to pressure. A 300-pound guy or 280-pound guy falls on the back of your leg. It is It is an extremely dangerous position to be in as a player. And as we saw, Sean Coleman is gone. This is exactly what happened to Nick Bosa, and he just came out with a high ankle sprain. So thank God, because this is one of those freak plays that happens on a fairly regular basis. But it's football. Bodies are destined by default to fall on top of one another. So when they happen, when they happen like this, where it's very unscripted and happenstance, and it's on your blind side, this is one of the results, unfortunately. And a lot of players succumb to injuries like this, especially when these big guys fall on top of them. So Sean Coleman's gone for the year. We have our first IR victim of the 2019 season. By the way, every single team in the NFL puts players on the IR. There is no chance of us not putting players on the IR. If that didn't happen, that would be a very unique anomaly. But nonetheless, we lost our player. So, on the positive, we did sign Sam Young. Sam Young is a little bit older. He is 32 years old. He comes from the Miami Dolphins. And Coleman has already had surgery, and so now he's on IR. Now he's recovering. So, but now we have Young, has a lot of experience. We needed to replace that swing tackle immediately. So he was visiting with the Saints and the Jets and the Bills earlier this offseason, and he was a former 6th-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys, coincidentally, in 2010. And he started 21 of 88 games, and started 21 of 88 games over the course of his career. So he started some, started not. So he's kind of has the right profile to kind of fill the void that we unfortunately were dealt in this past week's game.
Yeah, and so basically the problem with this, Ray, is that it just leaves very little margin for injury for the O-line, whereas we have depth at the defensive line. We were just talking about that, how we need players that are going to that are competent and capable of putting in quality downs. Now, with this thinning at the O-line, it isn't that way, and this is already a group that was very susceptible, especially at guards, for sacks. This is already a group that has been susceptible and has had this issue for the last 3 straight years. So to have our depth go down and have one of our guys go down in such a fashion is definitely concerning, and the quick release of Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be more important than ever coming into this next season, because I don't have a lot of confidence beyond our tackles in the full ability of this O-line, and this does make me nervous.
Our guards are okay. Lincoln Tomlinson, he's been pretty. He played 16 games last year. He started 16 games last year, but he wasn't a runaway top tier guard. It's kind of middle of the road guard. Our other guard is okay. We know our center, our veteran center, he's recovering from injury too right now. So I feel like the middle of the line is really where our susceptibility is, our vulnerability is. So it's between our center, who's aging, and our young guards, who are, a little not as consistent as our tackles. So if health and consistency can kind of get better between those 3 players, then, I think we're going to be okay. But considering that, like Jimmy Garoppolo, thank God he's got a quick release, because there's going to be times when that part of the line is really going to fall apart. So we're really going to, and we can't have running backs sitting back there blocking every play. So we need George Kittle out there catching the ball. We need Tevin Coleman out there running or catching. We need Matt Breida doing the same thing. So, and I really think that that's going to be our 1-2 punch this year. I don't think Jerick McKinnon is going to. I think he's going to struggle getting back to full form. But
I think so too.
Yeah,
we're going to address that at the end. We're going to address
right. I'll digress from that for now. But for now, that's what we saw. So we lost one of our backups. We did fill the void rather quickly, but it's the problem is that we just lost some depth that knew the playbook in a very complicated system at a position that's already a little vulnerable.
Exactly. Let's talk about our other negative, Raymond, and that was the penalties. My God, there were so many penalties, and this kind of plays into the last negative. So why don't you tell the Goldcast Nation, we're going to tell you guys our second negative takeaway, the penalties, and why this is a big deal.
Gosh, a lot of these came from players that, are either ultimately not going to make the roster or serve a backup role, but you still don't want to ever see 18 penalties for 216 yards. That's ridiculous. That's, equivalent to an opponent's, offensive output for an entire game, just handed to the other team via undisciplined play. So Dallas only had 5 comparatively. So that's something that needs to get shored up real quick, because I know that we're going to still probably sit most of our starters. I think Jimmy is going to get a series in this game. He might get a series. I think that's what's coming. I think that's what's expected. So
Shanahan announced that on the post conference after the first game.
So we're going to start to see a little bit more starters unless they're recovering. We know we're not going to see Nick Bosa, which is unfortunate, but at least he's going to make it, for the regular season most likely. But yeah, 18 penalties, horrible, horrible, horrible. I know we had discipline problems last year with the starting rotation, let alone, backups, third stringers. So 18 was just horrible. I'm sure that had to have been the worst, showing for penalties out of the entire league. I don't think anybody gave up more penalties than us.
And it also showed a lot of it coming from the O-line and obviously clearly having an inability to really stop the defensive line of the Cowboys. And that, again, kind of shows the lack of depth that we have at O-line. This is where they bleed into each other. This is part of the problem.
Yeah, and it was a lot of holding penalties. There was a couple pass interference calls, and that led to pressure. I know there wasn't Dallas, for the record, Dallas only had 1 sack and 3 TFLs. But, the pressure that they were able to get out there, I think it led to some bad plays. Although there was the interception that CJ Beathard threw, he tried to look off the safety. He didn't do a good job of doing that and then just threw it right to him. That was more CJ's fault than anything Dallas was able to generate pressure-wise. But, that's just kind of where we're at right now. So that's why we kind of raised an eyebrow at the offensive line, because A, we lost a player, B, we saw a lot of, desperate, maneuvers being made that led to penalties because guys were getting beat. So, I'm sure things are going to shore up. It's the first time for a lot of these players at NFL speed. So, and these aren't our starters, so that's something to also consider. So first string group is going to pay significantly better.
Yeah, so take it with a grain of salt, of course. Always, everything right now we take with a grain of salt. All right, so our final positive takeaway were those young Buck wide receivers. Let's talk about that, Raymond. Why is this the final positive for the Goldcast Nation?
Well, because this is a position group that no one's really come out and solidified themselves as the number 1 receiver, which is kind of good and bad. It means that everyone's kind of a little even. But at the same time, NFL teams, the best teams in the league, typically have a very dominant receiver in one form or another. For the Raiders, it's Antonio Brown via trade. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's Juju Smith-Schuster, who's emerged as a number 1, and so, and Odell Beckham Jr. over in Cleveland. So and there's quite a few more on other teams. Houston has a great receiver. You have Julio Jones for Atlanta. All these teams have these guys. All the top 10 teams, the playoff teams, have one of these guys. So we haven't had that emerge yet, but we did see Jalen Hurd. He got 2 touchdowns. They were great. There was the one perfect one early in the fourth quarter. CJ Beathard off the back shoulder threw it up. It was actually a perfect throw and a perfect catch. It looked very easy and smooth, which is what you want. And then the one from Nick Mullins within the 5, where he muscled his way in there. That was a great second effort to get that touchdown. You really want. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, so you want it. He needs to win those kinds of matchups. He's the type of receiver that will win those matchups against smaller corners. And so that was great to see. Deebo Samuel caught two passes for 61 yards. He was targeted 4 times. Jalen Hurd was also targeted 5 times. But Deebo Samuel, the really one that stood out was the deep pass on the left by C.J. Beathard. He understood it a little bit, but Deebo Samuel slowed down, adjusted, and then jumped up to grab it. So I like that aggressive maneuver to kind of go up and get the ball. So even when your quarterback doesn't make the perfect throw, you adjust to that and make the play happen anyways. And so that was good to see with Deebo Samuel. So I really want to see these guys kind of really build off of that momentum, because even though we saw those positives from those players, Kyle Shanahan was still very critical and said, hey, they had those good penalties, and I think that's Kyle Shanahan is, kind of playing double-edged sword here. He wants them to feel good about their productivity, but he also wants them to stay hungry. And so I think there's a little bit of psychological coaching going on with him kind of downplaying, and not praising them to high heaven like the press and like a lot of fans did, and him just saying like, hey, they got to keep they weren't perfect though, and he's and sure, that's, and he's not even just talking about catching the ball. There's also blocking on running plays. There's special teams. There's all kinds of elements that these guys are going to be thrown into. Returns, Dante Pettis was out there for a little bit. He was targeted once, but he didn't catch anything. So he needs to, and I want to see Dante Pettis really kind of get more attempts at kick returns, because that was really his specialty in college. He set the NCAA record for returns, with 9. So,
wow,
considering that was his a big skill set of his because of his speed, I think you need to give this guy more opportunities to really kind of continue to build off of what he was able to do in college, in addition to being, a speedy deep threat. So yeah, that's what I saw out of the wide receiver group. It was good. Kyle Shanahan said it wasn't perfect, so let's see how they do in game 2.
Yeah, let's definitely see. As you mentioned before, this, as you addressed at the very beginning, this is the one area that I'm most concerned with because of exactly what you addressed. There's no veteran leadership. We can point to a veteran at every position on the 49ers. Tevin Coleman in the backfield, Staley at the line, Dee Ford on the defensive line, Richard Sherman with the secondary. We can point to somebody at every position that has multiple players, except for wide receiver. Marquise Goodwin, I do not consider him a veteran. He's obviously played for several years, but he's streaky. Everyone else I just mentioned has either played in a conference championship or in a Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl. So they've played and have performed at the highest levels. So that's what we're talking about here. And so we don't have that position at wide receiver. So it makes me very nervous. There isn't a guy we can hang our hat on. Pierre Garçon was supposed to be that player, and that's what last year was supposed to be kind of the beginning of. He's maybe the Anquan Bolden, if you will, of this new era. But that clearly did not happen, and now he's gone. So we really don't have anybody. And these rooks, this could be the new rookie sensation. The Saints a couple years ago, they had those 2 rookie sensation cornerbacks, and this is a possibility that we can have it at wide receiver position here in San Francisco. So it is a position I'm very interested in. A little nervous and intimidated by, or I should say just nervous by, not intimidated by, but nervous by. So let's see. Good showing. Not perfect, as Shanahan said, but a good showing.
Yeah, and I think if they're able to, if they have a similar game like they did today or yesterday, as they did on Saturday, if they have a similar performance in Denver as they did in Santa Clara on Saturday against Dallas, then that will also be a positive, even if it's more or less the same productivity, because that's a sign of consistency. And Deebo Samuel, he also was handed the ball off on a reverse and got 14 yards out of it. So, showing some versatility there in the run game as well. So Deebo not only caught passes, but he also ran the ball effectively, even though it was just one touch.
Definitely. All right, so I have one question for you, Raymond, and it was touching on something you were discussing a little bit earlier. Will we ever see Jason Verrett and Jerick McKinnon? Will we ever see them actually play in a 49er uniform? At all. I'm saying at all.
I think,
or are these guys going to be redshirted for their entire career, and then we're like it's going to be like a Tank Carradine situation, and they're going to be gone?
well, I think if anything, they'll be available in some form for the first quarter of the season. So they're going to have some play. We're going to see them within the first 4 games of the season, but considering the nature of their injury is very significant. It's not something to be overlooked, and there's a reason why this kind of injury ends careers. Remember Kendall Hunter in the Jim Harbaugh era? He had
Yeah.
two. He had 2 of those and never came back from that. And he was on his way to being a solid number 2 back. He had good speed. He was a great complement to Gore, different style. So it was a very nice 1-2 punch, and unfortunately got derailed by a couple of tears and was never able to recover. So again, Adrian Peterson is an exception to that. Richard Sherman, who had both of his ACLs worked on, is an exception to that. So those are the types of guys that just have a different mental capacity for performance level, which is why
it could also be rehab, who they're rehabbing with. Maybe they make that pit stop in Germany, get that illegal surgery. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a huge part of it too. Is like, are you being consistent with your rehab, with what the trainers are telling you to do day in and day out? Not a lot of people are, not all players are good about that kind of stuff too. So I know Richard Sherman is. That's very obvious. Even though he wasn't 100% last year, he still played good. So, and now he's 100%. So we're gonna see the old Richard Sherman, and I believe in him. He's not somebody that he typically backs up all that shit talking he does. He's very, very similar to Deion Sanders in that regard. Deion Sanders talked a lot of shit, but he backed it up majority of the time, and Richard Sherman's in that same category. So, but I think we're going to see them we'll see them between week 1 and week 4, but I don't have a lot of confidence that they'll last past that point, just because of the nature of the injury and how difficult it is to get back. And we're already seeing them showing signs of, that they're not able to cut when the second they got out there, I mean, a sprained ankle, that might have something to do with it. Might just have been a wrong step. You're not, he hasn't played in a long time. Jason Verrett has, so his body's not, it has to reacclimate to that speed, those cuts, the muscle atrophy is there. So that's part of it. It's not that he's injured prone or anything like that. It's just the muscle has to get back into that mode of memory where it's able to do that and has to build back up to allow him to make those maneuvers. And if he doesn't treat his body carefully while trying to get back to 100%, he could overexert himself by trying to play at his previous level, but his muscle and twitch reactions are not there, and he'll get injured like he did, with the sprained ankle. And as far as McKinnon is concerned, that's the same thing. You've got muscle atrophy there. You've got to build back to your 100% speed. You can't just go back out there and go 100 miles an hour just like you did before the injury. You do have to work back into it. So, and if you don't do it right, there are going to be setbacks like soreness in his knee, which is what he experienced when he went out there. And so now he has to kind of take it slow, and they're being cautious with him because, they're way more sensitive about injury, than ever before. So, they're doing the right thing in allowing them to rest and recover, but at the same time, it's going to be a challenge for them to get back to 100%. And both of them are not 100% right now, and I'm just concerned that when they get out there and try to push 100%, that it's going to lead to further injury, and it's going to keep them out of the game. And I see them max 4 games.
I am 1,000% on board with you. Maximum 4 games. I actually don't think we're ever going to see McKinnon personally. Verrett we'll see for maybe 2, 3, 4 games, and that's about it. And
I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. I'm not saying this. I take no pleasure in making that prediction.
100%. I'm with you. 100%. We take no pleasure in this, but I am with you. I completely agree. All right. So the next game is this Monday, August 19th, 5 p.m. on ESPN. San Francisco 49ers at the Denver Broncos. Preseason game 2 and the first start of Jimmy G since week 3 of last year. Yes, Jimmy G. Jimmy the G's. Garoppolo gang, Gucci gang is back. He is here.
So that means we're going to see the starters. I would really love to see Tevin Coleman out there. I'd really love to see Matt Breida get 1 or 2 touches in that first series. I mean, it's one series, so I think we're going to see maybe 2-3 passes or 2 passes, 2 run plays. It might be split. Depends. I don't know what Shanahan plans, as far as touches are concerned. But either way, I want to see either Tevin Coleman and or Breida get involved as well. If you're going to have Jimmy out there with the starting offensive line rotation, then I imagine he's also going to throw one of our 1-2 punch backs in there too.
I agree. I think so too. You're obviously not going to put you're just not going to put Jimmy G out
right,
there
which means we're going to exactly. Which means we're going to see Kittle. Debo Samuel's going to be out there. We know that Trent Taylor is gone for 4 to 6 weeks because he got injured again. And so he's starting to. I know his previous injury was much more significant than this past injury, but it's still not. It's not a good sign for him to come away with a stress fracture from Thursday's game. And part of it is because he's a small dude. He's a really small dude. He's smaller than Wes Welker. So
wow, really?
And yeah, he is a little bit smaller than Wes Welker. Wes Welker was bigger, not by much.
Wow,
but I mean. Trent Taylor's a small dude. He's really small, and I know that people like short, little, speedy slot receivers like that. Tyreek Hill's really small. But it's it's now he's gone. Now he's going to miss week 1, week 2. So again, even though he's the leading slot receiver coming out of training camp, now he's got another setback with this stress fracture. So hopefully hopefully the injuries kind of stops at that point and allows him to kind of pick up where he left off in his rookie season, which was very promising because that's really the whole reason why he was drafted. I think he's a talented guy, and he's obviously got a terrific coach that knows his position like the back of his hand. And so, I really want to see him take over. Otherwise, someone else has got to play that position because, we have a lot of guys, Kendrick Bourne, Jordan Matthew. They're not necessarily slot, but those are guys that, are going to have to rotate in and out. Debo Samuel, probably I would see him in the slot, even though he's playing wide out. Dante Pettis, another one that could do that. So, but these are guys that are those 3 players are all competing for the number 1 wide receiver spot, number 1 and number 2. So, but we'll just have to see.
Yep, we will.
They got a joint practice on Saturday and then Monday. They're off on Sunday, so then Monday.
Any final thoughts, Ray, before we wrap it up?
I hope Jimmy G scores a touchdown via pass. Not running.
Too. Not running for his life.
No, he's not Steve Young.
or Kaepernick.
Yes, or Joe Montana. He doesn't seem to have the scrambling ability of any of those 3 quarterbacks, to be honest. And Jeff Garcia too. Jeff Garcia was a big scrambler. So he's much more. He sat behind Tom Brady for 3 years, and Tom Brady never runs. So he's got that sit back, take the hit, make the throw mentality.
Yeah. Well, how are we going to know when he's never played a full season yet?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's true.
I know. Yeah. All right. Raymond, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ray Solis, and you can also follow me on Instagram at Ray Solis1.
You can find me on Instagram at Rudy Solis 3RD and Twitter at Rudy Solis 3.
I'm active on both. Yeah, yes, that is yours. I'm active
on
both.
No. Instagram is Rudy Solis 3 and Twitter is Rudy Solis 3RD. I don't know. It'll be if you go into the synopsis of this podcast, it'll be right there.
Yes, it'll be right there. Yeah, I'm active on both, but as far as like sports stuff, I tend to most of all of those, the press and the players are all on Twitter, so that's usually where I spend a lot of time reading or retweeting something.
Awesome. So concludes another edition of the Gold Cast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
Boom. We'll see you next time. Same Goldcast time, same Goldcast channel.
This is the Goldcast.